Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: China is fighting a mosquito-borne chikungunya outbreak by releasing millions of modified mosquitoes into cities. But could this backfire? A former U.S. Army virologist weighs in. Amid high-stakes trade negotiations with the Chinese regime, the White House is looking to expand a deal involving U.S. companies selling to China. Lawmakers are raising questions about the agreement. China is slapping steep new tariffs on Canadian canola, threatening billions in exports. The move escalates a year-long trade dispute that's already putting Canadian exporters on edge. Tensions in the South China Sea. U.S. vessels sailing near the disputed Scarborough Shoal just days after two Chinese ships collided. We'll take a closer look at what's happening on these contested waters. And a Chinese fighter jet intercepted a Philippine plane over the disputed Scarborough Shoal, escalating regional tensions. Outbreaks from a mosquito-borne virus continue to rage across China. The country's top medical bureau has labeled 6 provinces as highest risk areas with tight safety measures for chikungunya. Some of the official countermeasures are raising eyebrows, including the release of millions of mosquitoes. China's official data already recorded over 8,000 cases, but the real number could be higher. Last week, the U.S. CDC issued a second-level travel warning on China, urging U.S. citizens to take precautions against outbreaks in southern China. The CDC said the virus spreads through mosquito bites, and currently no treatment is available for the patients. Recently, a state-backed university in China's Guangdong province, where outbreaks are most severe, said it's taking a special approach. The university owns the world's biggest mosquito factory. This factory produces millions of male mosquitoes every week, many of which are released back into urban areas. These male mosquitoes are exposed to special X-rays, making female mosquitoes infertile after mating. But how effective is this approach?
Will these mosquitoes become more adaptable to multiple pathogens and carry them simultaneously? These are issues that require more detailed and careful research. Once you are able to perform gene editing on mosquitoes, it also brings another danger, that mosquitoes could be used as a biological weapon.
Now, even cities in northern China, including Beijing, have detected chikungunya cases. The virus rarely causes death, but it poses serious risks to vulnerable populations like infants and the elderly. Patients can experience symptoms for weeks, including fever, joint pain, and muscle aches. Some Chinese citizens say authorities failed to warn the public in time.
This has always been the Communist Party's usual practice. First, it covers things up. Whatever it is, it covers it up first. After covering it up, it observes the situation. Once it sees that it can't control it anymore, then it informs the public.
And now outside mainland China, Hong Kong and Taiwan have all reported chikungunya cases. Amid high-stakes trade negotiations with the Chinese regime, the White House is looking to expand a deal involving U.S. companies selling to China. It allows chip-making companies to avoid export controls. Lawmakers are raising concerns about national security and the legality of the deal. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the report.
After previously banning the sale of AI chips to China, Trump made a deal to allow U.S. chip makers NVIDIA and AMD to sell certain chips to China if they pay the U.S. government a slice of their profits. Under the new deal, NVIDIA and AMD will pay 15% of their revenues from China H20 chip sales to the U.S. government, this in exchange for U.S. export licenses. And yesterday, the press secretary at the White House said this type of deal could be expanded.
Right now, it stands with these 2 companies. Perhaps it could expand in the future to other companies. I think it's a creative idea and solution. The legality of it, the mechanics of it is still being ironed out by the Department of Commerce.
Now, lawmakers in Congress aren't necessarily happy with this. Leaders of the House's Select Committee on the CCP are raising national security concerns. The ranking member wants to take action to prevent these types of deals in the future.
I'm going to introduce legislation to require congressional approval for the sale of these types of chips to the CCP and adversaries. I just asked the question, what's next? Is he going to sell aircraft carriers to them for a 15% tip? Is he going to...
And the chairman of the committee, John Molinar, a Republican, said there's a legality question at play. He said, quote, and we should not set a precedent that incentivizes the government to grant licenses to sell China technology that will enhance its AI capabilities. This deal comes at a sensitive moment in U.S.-China trade talks. The Trump administration just extended a trade truce with the regime for another 90 days. The Treasury Secretary described all of this negotiating as a chess game.
China's like a multi-level chess game. It's our biggest economic rival and our biggest military rival. So we're solving for several variables here.
Chinese leader Xi Jinping and President Trump might have a summit later this year. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
China is hitting Canada with steep tariffs, nearly 76% on canola seeds, escalating a trade dispute that's putting Canadian farmers and exporters on edge. The announcement came Wednesday as Canadian farmers face growing uncertainty over access to one of their biggest export markets. Take a look.
China slapping steep new duties of about 76% on Canadian canola starting Thursday. The move is effectively shutting the door on one of Canada's largest agricultural exports. Beijing says it's an anti-dumping measure in response to a trade dispute last year when Canada placed tariffs on Chinese EV imports. Canada's trade and agriculture ministers say they're open to talks but want fair market access for Canadian farmers. The Canola Council of Canada says the new rate of about 76% makes selling to China nearly impossible. Canada shipped more than $3.6 billion worth of canola to China last year. Most of the exports were raw seeds, making China by far its largest buyer. This comes as Canada faces trade tensions with both the U.S. and China, its top canola oil and meal market. Beijing already placed tariffs on Canadian canola oil and meal back in March. At the time, Canada also imposed 25% tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminum. The canola industry denied China's allegations of dumping and believes the move is tied to wider trade and political tensions. Meanwhile, Australia, who is the world's second largest canola exporter, sees a chance to regain access to China's market after years-long freeze.
Tensions on the high seas. The United States deployed 2 warships on Wednesday near a disputed shoal in the South China Sea, the same location where 2 Chinese Navy and Coast Guard ships collided 2 days ago while trying to drive away a Philippine ship. Let's zoom in.
Both China and the Philippines claim Scarborough Shoal and other outcroppings in the South China Sea. The 2 U.S. warships were shadowed by a Chinese Navy ship while sailing about 30 nautical miles from the Scarborough Shoal. There were no reports of any incidents. The Navy has staged what it calls freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea for years. That has angered China, and its forces have had close run-ins with U.S. warships and aircraft during patrols in international waters and airspace. China's military said it monitored and drove away a U.S. destroyer that sails near the disputed Scarborough Shoal. The U.S. Navy called China's statement false.
More on the South China Sea, a tense encounter high above disputed waters. A Chinese fighter jet intercepting a Philippine Coast Guard plane during a patrol over the Scarborough Shoal. Philippine Coast Guard plane was carrying journalists. A Reuters reporter on board says the jet closed in fast, at one point just about 200 feet away, swooping behind, above, and alongside the smaller plane. The standoff lasted roughly 20 minutes. From below, a Chinese Navy ship was radioing a warning to the Philippine plane, telling it to leave immediately. And joining us to discuss is retired Marine Colonel Grant Newsham, Senior Fellow at the Center for Security Policy and author of When China Attacks. Grant Newsham, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
I'm glad to be here.
There's been a lot of focus on the Philippines or the South China Sea recently after 2 Chinese ships collided with each other while they were going after a Philippine Coast Guard. And then in the skies above, some Chinese fighter jets were doing intercept maneuvers towards Philippine ships. There's actually a Reuters reporter on board that plane. Given all of these moves, you know, the U.S. has sent 2 warships there. What is the message the U.S. is sending by sending these ships?
Well, finally, the Americans are saying, look, don't push your luck. We are going to be here. We are going to operate in this area. We're going to support our friends, the Filipinos. It's about time we've done this. This is the first time that the Americans have actually sent some ships to the sharp end, to where there's actually been some fighting, some scuffling, and it's long overdue. The Chinese have the ability actually to flood the zone, keep ships, keep maritime militia boats in an area, and we tend to come when we go someplace and just sail through. So there's more to be done, but it is a good first step, and sort of a sign of sort of fortitude from the United States on behalf of the Filipinos.
A lot to watch for sure, because the U.S. and the Philippines do have their mutual defense treaty, which no one really wants to call into action, because then that could lead to a broader conflict. But there is that element as well to that. Now, the U.S. recently just extended the tariff truce with China for another 90 days. Given these belligerent moves by Beijing, though, does China actually want a trade deal?
The Chinese are pushing their hand and not backing down. And they're acting as if they don't really care if there's a deal. They actually do. But they're, as a negotiating tool, they are a strategy. They are, say, pushing and acting like, well, we don't really have to have this. We've got leverage over you via our rare earth material exports and all the manufacturing that is done in China that you Americans depend on. So they're playing their hand, I say, pretty tough. The U.S. is in a bit of a fix, but at the same time, we have a good hand to play as well. Extending it 90 days where you can debate that, it may be a good move on the part of the Trump administration, but it looks bad. When you are keep pushing off sort of the date at which we were supposed to come to a decision, and if not, there was going to be trouble for the Chinese. But here we've said, well, we'll give you another 3 months. As I said, that doesn't look good, even though there may be some good reasons for having done it.
I want to zoom out a bit in terms of how Western firms and companies should be looking at this with, of course, the extension of the tariff truce between the U.S. and China as we wait for that ultimate trade deal. Some are wondering if they should double down on the China market, right? Is now the time to invest inside? But you also, on the other hand, have more and more news and headlines about exit bans or arbitrary detainment, especially of Americans. There was just a 7-year-old kid not allowed to leave the country. Is that a sign that all is not well with China's economy? How should investors especially be reading all of this?
Well, the Chinese economy has always been a Ponzi scheme from the very beginning, and that should have been obvious to everyone. But got about 3 generations of American and Western business people who've gone all in the China market, and it's like going into a rigged casino, thinking that you just have to score a little bit, and then it's somebody else's problem once you get home and have some money in the bank and have a nice corner office. But that's the nature of this market. And to call it something else really takes some sort of massive self-deception. But what we're seeing is the Chinese, really the nature of this economy, of this system, where a contract means nothing more than what Xi Jinping says it means. And you go into that market, and you should know that the Chinese Communist Party's intention is to destroy you. It's to suck your technology and any sort of know-how that you've got, replace you with a Chinese company, and then, if they're nice, might buy up your assets for you at pennies on the dollar and say, well, nice to see you. But that's the nature of it. And it has always been like that. And I wonder at what point, I say our best and brightest, the Wharton graduates and Wall Street whiz kids, are going to recognize this. I think, but they're sort of figuring it out. But at the same time, the allure of making a killing in the China market, it still seems to be pretty strong. And there seems to be no limit to which, say, the U.S.-China Business Council and its leaders won't sort of prostrate themselves and try to convince themselves that all is really not that bad. And if we just give the government more time, well, it will be a normal economy. Well, that's a fool's errand, and I think we've got people who still want to play it, but it's becoming increasingly hard to deny.
Lots to watch for sure. Grant Newsham, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me. I always appreciate it.
Coming up, China's new social insurance rule is shaking up the job market. Now even retirees are being called back to work, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. China's long arm in a resource-rich continent. A former deputy president of Kenya spoke about Chinese influence in his country. He calls it economic invasion. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Australia and the Pacific island nation of Vanuatu have struck a deal to boost economic and security ties. The $327 million Nakama agreement will see Australia invest in Vanuatu over the next decade, aiming to benefit both countries. The agreement is part of the U.S. allies' effort to counter the Chinese Communist Party's influence in the region. Here's more.
Under the agreement, Australia plans to provide funding to support Vanuatu's large data centers, enhance security, and offer budget assistance. The deal comes as China, Vanuatu's top creditor, increases its influence in the Pacific. In recent years, China has funded major infrastructure projects in Vanuatu, including a new president's office last year. The agreement will be signed by the prime ministers of both countries in the coming weeks.
Pacific island nations like Vanuatu are strategically important because of their location in the Pacific. China has been expanding its influence across the region, investing in infrastructure and using its economic power to draw countries closer. In response, the U.S. is stepping up its presence too, opening embassies, strengthening ties, and projecting its influence to counter China. This tug of war highlights just how crucial Vanuatu and other Pacific island nations have become in the broader competition between Washington and Beijing. Recently, the name Yang Lanlan has become one of the most searched names on Chinese social media, sparked by a luxury car crash in Sydney. A few weeks ago, Yang slammed her $1 million Rolls-Royce into a Mercedes van, seriously injuring the driver, who works as a chauffeur for an Australian celebrity. So why did Yang's case go viral in China? At just 23, Yang reportedly owns 2 Rolls-Royces and lives in a luxury penthouse apartment in East Sydney. Yet media and internet users could find almost no clue about her identity, prompting speculation that she may have ties to high-ranking Chinese Communist Party officials, claims that cannot be verified. Yang is expected to appear in court later this week. We will keep you posted. A new policy from Beijing could be a blow to China's sluggish economy. Starting in September, China will implement a new rule requiring businesses to provide social insurance for their employees. Sounds like a good idea, but for business owners and employees already struggling, the new rule is sparking panic.
We're done for. It's like the sky's fallen on the food industry. The door to total ruin is wide open. I just want to ask one thing. Do we need social insurance, or does social insurance need us?
This is pushing every business owner to the brink of ruin.
In early August, China's top court issued a new legal guideline on labor rules, and one key rule has everyone talking. Starting September 1st, all businesses will be required to pay social insurance for their employees. Previously, employers and employees could negotiate whether or not to pay social insurance. As soon as the rule was announced, Chinese social media lit up with job ads, but not the usual kind. A wave of posts began popping up, looking to hire retired workers. Big names like McDonald's and Universal Studios Beijing are doing it, but the majority come from small and micro-sized businesses.
Hey Dad, didn't you already retire in June? If you've got nothing going on, come help out at my restaurant. That way I won't have to pay social insurance for you.
I make 5,500 yuan a month. The boss said starting September 1st, we have to start paying for social insurance. That means 1,500 is going to be deducted from my salary, leaving me with just 4,000. I just can't do it anymore. I've decided to quit at the end of August and just lie flat at home.
Why retirees? Under China's current rules, retired workers already receive basic pension benefits. Companies that hire them don't have to pay extra pension contributions, which can save employers up to 16% in places like Shanghai.
You've got elderly folks taking jobs while young people are being laid off. No jobs for the youth. They're just lying flat at home. That's going to cause a lot of social problems. This time, the government has taken a one-size-fits-all approach, forcing all these small and micro businesses, even self-employed ones, to buy social insurance for their employees. That means a huge spike in costs for these businesses. The result? They'll shut down on their own. They'll go out of business.
China's Academy of Social Sciences warned that the country's pension fund could actually run out by 2035, raising big concerns about the future of Social Security in China.
China's boosting its influence in Africa, a resource-rich continent. The former deputy president of Kenya recently visited the United States and spoke about Chinese influence in his country. NTD's David Lam has the story.
We are concerned as a country about the Chinese invasion to Kenya. It's economic invasion by the Chinese people to Kenya, and has literally reduced our business people into beggars. The Chinese people have come and taken over even small businesses.
Gachagua claims that Chinese contractors have started construction businesses and living units in Kenya, but the earnings get sent back to China.
It's just too much pressure. The Chinese are very strong because of the kind of money they bring into the country. They have literally compromised everybody, so nobody wants to listen to what we are saying. So the Kenyan people are, they are in a very difficult situation because the government officials are the ones who are doing business with the Chinese.
David Lam, NTD News, California.
Kenya is $92 billion in debt. China is Kenya's biggest bilateral creditor. Kenya is rich in resources, especially rare earth minerals. The mineral deposits are valued at over $60 billion. And that's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. Round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.